Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is suspending his presidential campaign and offering support to former President Trump. What the independent candidate said about the reasons behind his decision, as he assured supporters he's not formally ending his bid. David Lamb is in Arizona with the latest. And how former President Trump is responding to RFK Jr.'s support as speculation grows over a potential joint appearance. Iris Tao has more on how the exit could impact the race and the reaction from Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign. Vice President Kamala Harris outlines her vision for America, and Americans are giving their take. NBA great Steph Curry says the Oval Office would suit the former senator. Plus, a Sandy Hook teacher recalls the deaths of 20 first graders. Yana Monahan has the highlights from the final day of the Democratic National Convention. Is an interest rate cut on the horizon? Key takeaways from Fed Chair Jerome Powell's keynote speech in Jackson Hole, Wyoming today. And a historic visit in Ukraine today. What India's Prime Minister says about finding a solution to end the war. Ariane Pasdar has a Ukraine update. The body of British tech tycoon Mike Lynch's daughter has been found. As the rescue operation comes to an end, attention switches to the official investigation into the disaster.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing today that he's suspending his presidential campaign and is now giving support to former President Trump. NTD's David Lamb has more from Kennedy's event in Arizona.
I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, and if the presidential election is anything like the weather, it's heating up. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just announced that he's suspending his presidential campaign and endorsing former President Trump. He said that he spoke with Trump over the past few weeks in intense, long discussions and found that they aligned on several issues and disagreed greatly on a number of other issues. But the main issue is that Trump said he will end the Ukraine and Russian war on the first day of being in the White House, and that this alone would justify Kennedy's support for him.
Three great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, and now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children.
Kennedy's also saying that his name will still be on the ballot in certain red and blue states, and that he encourages people to still vote for him in those states where he doesn't think it will impact either Trump or Harris. But in certain swing states, he said he will be dropping out of the election in those states.
In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House.
Now, Kennedy also said that this decision is an agonizing one for his family, wife, and friends, but he has hope. He believes that if Trump keeps his word, that America would be healthier and more successful in the next couple of years, and the war would end sooner. Back to you in the newsroom.
As RFK Jr. gives support to former President Trump, speculation is growing that the two might join forces tonight at a campaign event in Phoenix, Arizona. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is citing data to say the backing will help Trump in battleground states. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from Phoenix, where Trump will speak later tonight.
At around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, former President Trump will be taking the stage right behind me here at a Turning Point event in Glendale, Arizona. His campaign just said earlier today that a special guest will be joining him, and Trump just posted on Truth Social that, quote, big crowd and even bigger surprise. And earlier today, while speaking about no tax on tips at an event in Las Vegas, Trump gave his first reaction to RFK Jr.'s new endorsement for him. Watch.
We just had a very nice endorsement from RFK Jr., Bobby. And I'll be talking about that. We're heading out right after this. We're going to be going to Arizona. We'll be talking about that. And
Trump's been on a week-long Battleground state blitz as counter-programming to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And yesterday, while touring the border in Tucson, Arizona, Trump told us that he has great respect for RFK Jr. and that he thinks he's been treated unfairly.
I've known him a long time. Very smart. Don't forget he was treated very unfairly. I think he would have beaten Biden in a primary. The Kennedy name and him in particular. And they made it impossible. They said you have to get 70% of the vote just to qualify.
And now the biggest question is how RFK Jr.'s new exit will impact the 2024 elections. The Trump campaign just earlier today sent out a new memo citing latest polling data from Battleground states and suggesting that, quote, in every state, RFK Jr.'s vote breaks for President Trump. It gave the example of Arizona, where it says based on a 2020 turnout model, the net vote gained by Trump due to RFK Jr.'s exit will be 41,000 votes, which is over 4 times Biden's winning margin in 2020. But Harris's campaign is also trying to win over RFK Jr. supporters, saying in a new statement that, quote, Vice President Harris wants to earn your support, adding that, quote, even if we do not agree on every issue, Kamala Harris knows there is more that unites us than divides us. Harris's campaign is focusing on issues like freedoms and opportunity for all, while Trump tonight is expected to talk about inflation, the border, and crime. Reporting from Glendale, Arizona, Iris Howe, NTD News.
Proof of citizenship is now required for voter registration in Arizona. That's after the Supreme Court approved a request from the Republican National Committee and voted to reinstate part of an Arizona law. The justices ruled 5-4, with Amy Coney Barrett joining the 3 liberal justices. The ruling partially agrees with the request made by the Republican National Committee. It had filed an emergency request just ahead of Arizona's ballot printing deadline. The decision impacts more than 40,000 people who are registered to vote this November, according to Arizona's Secretary of State. The RNC has similar lawsuits in the works targeting key swing states like Michigan and North Carolina. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley described the effort as a, quote, seismic win in the fight to stop non-citizens from voting. The Democratic National Convention has wrapped up. NTD's Daniel Monahan breaks down some key moments from last night, including Vice President Harris's speech.
Vice President Kamala Harris says America is charting a new way forward.
To a future with a strong and growing middle class, because we know a strong middle class has always been critical to America's success.
Harris laid out her economic priorities.
And as president, I will bring together labor and workers and small business owners and entrepreneurs and American companies to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to lower the cost of everyday needs.
And promised to care for American troops and their families.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
She also called for an end to the war in the Middle East.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
Roy Cooper.
North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper lauded Harris for standing up to banks during the 2011 mortgage crisis. He shared a story of how she walked away from a $4 billion settlement other state attorneys general were ready to agree to.
That's Kamala. And we all know what happened. The banks caved. That $4 billion for California families became $20 billion.
Maya Harris.
Kamala Harris's sister, Maya Harris, says the vice president knows what it's like to be underestimated and be counted out.
Where others push darkness, Kamala sees promise. Where others feel detachment, Kamala fosters connection.
Some speakers like Sandy Hook teacher Abby Clements called for gun control.
20 beautiful first grade children and 6 of my beautiful colleagues were killed. They should still be here.
Kim Rubio's daughter attended Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. The devastated mom says her daughter got a Good Citizen Award for receiving all A's on the day of the tragic shooting.
She wears a St. Mary's sweatshirt and a smile that lights up the room. 30 minutes later, a gunman murders her, 18 classmates and 2 teachers.
Former Congressman Adam Kinzinger says he learned something about the Democratic Party.
And I want to let my fellow Republicans in on the secret. The Democrats are as patriotic as us. They love this country just as much as we do.
Kinzinger retired from Congress after he criticized his own party in the aftermath of the January 6th Capitol breach.
What's up, everybody?
NBA champion Steph Curry shared a video endorsing Harris as president.
I got to visit Kamala with my team in the White House last year, and I can tell you one thing I knew then, and I definitely know now. The Oval Office suits her well.
Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland says America needs a president like Harris who understands the importance of taking care of the planet.
She held polluters accountable for spilling oil into the San Francisco Bay. She defended President Obama's Clean Power Plan in court.
Anti-Israel protesters clashed with Chicago police during the last night of the convention. Some swung wooden signs down at officers. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Now that Democratic nominee Kamala Harris has laid out her long-awaited vision for the country, who does Alan Lichtman believe is the most likely to win the presidential race? Lichtman is the historian who has accurately predicted nearly all U.S. presidential elections since 1984. NTD's Arlene Richards finds out where he's leaning this year and why he won't tell anyone his final pick until after Labor Day.
Alan Lichtman, an American University historian, has been predicting presidential elections since 1984, and he's gotten almost all of them right, including the one he's most famous for, that Donald Trump would win in 2016. Since Vice President Kamala Harris entered the race, Lichtman has taken on numerous interviews, and for the past 2 weeks, he's talked about where the race is leaning. He told CNN this.
The Democrats finally got smart and united around Kamala Harris, and that means they preserve the contest key. So they've only lost one key, which still puts the Democrats in a good position for re-election. A lot would have to go wrong for them to lose.
In order to make his predictions, Lichtman relies on what he calls the 13 keys.
My 13 keys to the White House, which is premised on the idea that American elections are essentially votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party.
He said it's governance, not campaigning, that counts. But included among his 13 keys are party contest, policy change, and charisma. He said that a lot would have to go wrong for Harris to lose. He's even said that Robert F. Kennedy's withdrawal from the race will benefit Harris. Lichtman has appeared on several news shows since Harris got on the top of the Democratic ticket. He's all but made his prediction for Harris to win the race. So why has he decided to wait until after Labor Day to announce his pick?
The problem is, the period after the convention between the end of August, that week or so, and Labor Day is the most dead time of the year, when people are on vacation, not paying attention. That flips right after Labor Day.
He said he wants to give his prediction the maximum impact. Lichtman plans to announce his prediction first on his own live show and not anywhere else. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Federal Reserve is signaling that lower interest rates are finally on the horizon. Chair Jerome Powell delivered a keynote speech in an annual gathering of central bankers and economists in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Overall, the economy continues to grow at a solid pace. but the inflation and labor market data show an evolving situation. The upside risks to inflation have diminished, and the downside risks to employment have increased. The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Powell's latest comments open the door wide open for the first interest rate cut since 2020. It's slated for the Fed's upcoming policy meeting on September 17th and 18th. The upcoming decision to cut rates is a sign that officials feel confident enough that price pressures are coming under control, but also that the economy is weakening. Powell said the Fed will do everything it can to support a strong labor market as it makes further progress toward price stability. For the first time since Ukraine's independence, an Indian prime minister is visiting Kyiv. Ukraine is getting ready to celebrate Independence Day despite the ongoing conflict with Russia. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pasdar, has the war update.
People chanted the name of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he arrived in Ukraine on Friday. It's the first time an Indian leader has visited in modern Ukrainian history. Modi used the occasion to urge President Volodymyr Zelensky to sit down for talks with Russia.
No conflict can be resolved on the battlefield. The road to resolution can only be found through dialogue and diplomacy.
Zelensky later responded by saying that India has the power to bring the conflict closer to an end.
You're a big country, you have big influence, and you can stop Putin, and you can stop and hold his economy and put him really on his place.
Zelensky addressed the military on Friday as the nation marked the National Flag Day on the eve of Independence Day.
In this war, we are first of all fighting for the right for justice for Ukraine and Ukrainians, the right for what is ours.
33 years ago, Ukraine gained independence from the Soviet Union, which was mainly controlled by the Kremlin. Fighting, meanwhile, continues in Russia's Kursk region. Ukraine released this video saying it shows high-precision glide bombs striking a Russian platoon strongpoint. Russia published this video appearing to show a drone attack on a Ukrainian tank in the region. So far, almost 200,000 people had to be evacuated from Kursk due to the fighting. And the US on Friday imposed a new massive tranche of sanctions. The Treasury Department released a statement saying 1 day ahead of Ukrainian Independence Day, the US targeted nearly 400 individuals and entities both in Russia and outside its borders. The sanctions target those supporting Russia's war effort and those helping Moscow evade current sanctions. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
Inside Russia, 4 prison staff members were killed at a maximum security penal colony in the south of the country. This is after knife-wielding inmates identifying as ISIS members took several of the staff hostage. Russia's Federal Prison Service said 4 attackers held a total of 8 prison staff and 4 inmates hostage. The attackers posted videos of the event on social media showing the victims' bodies in graphic detail. Russian special forces said their snipers killed the alleged hostage takers in an operation and freed the hostages. Authorities have not yet identified a motive behind the attack. The body of British tech tycoon Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, has been recovered. She was the last person still unaccounted for after the family's luxury yacht, the Bayesian, sank earlier this week off the coast of Sicily. Hannah's body was discovered today by divers who had been searching the submerged vessel for the past 5 days. 7 people, including Mike Lynch himself, died when the Bayesian capsized during a fierce pre-dawn storm on Monday. 15 people survived, including Lynch's wife. A spokesperson for the Lynch family said they are devastated, in shock, and are being comforted and supported by family and friends. With the rescue operation nearing its end, attention now shifts to the official investigation into the disaster. Italian prosecutors are investigating potential manslaughter charges and negligent shipwreck. So far, no one has been formally charged. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Tropical storm Hone is threatening to deliver a blow to Hawaii this weekend. A tropical storm watch has been raised for Hawaii's Big Island, and the storm is on track to pass close to the state this weekend. It's set to bring heavy rain, strong winds, dangerous seas, and fire concerns to a dry state still recovering from one of the most devastating fires in U.S. history. The storm is forecast to pass about 150 miles south of the Big Island late Saturday into Sunday morning. Rain and wind are expected for much of the weekend after Hone's outer rain bands start to impact the Big Island early Saturday. Breezy conditions will pick up late Friday and early Saturday ahead of Hone's worst conditions. That will raise fire danger over parts of the state where winds get stronger without rain to accompany them. And starting this weekend, Floridians can stock up on storm supplies at a discount. A sales tax holiday will begin, providing an opportunity for residents to prepare for storms as the state heads into the peak of hurricane season. NTD's Christina Corona has details.
During the disaster preparedness sales tax holiday, consumers can purchase items such as batteries, pet supplies, portable generators, and more without paying taxes starting Saturday, August 24th through September 6th. This tax break is part of a package approved by lawmakers and Governor Ron DeSantis earlier this year. Shoppers can save on taxes for various items, including reusable ice packs priced at $20 or less, portable radios, fuel tanks, and battery packs costing $50 or less, food storage coolers at $60 or less, tarps at $100 or less, and portable generators priced at $3,000 or less. The tax exemptions cover items such as wet dog or cat food priced at $10 or less, pet leashes at $20 or less, cat litter at $25 or less, pet beds at $40 or less, and over-the-counter pet medications, pet carriers, and bags of dry dog or cat food costing $100 or less. Items can be purchased at most stores or online to qualify for the sales tax exemption. Hurricane season typically intensifies in mid-August, peaking around September 10th. This year, experts predict an above-average season with over 20 named storms expected by November. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The Justice Department filed an antitrust lawsuit today against real estate software company Realpage. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the firm is engaging in an illegal scheme that allows landlords to coordinate rental price hikes.
We allege that this software is developed, marketed, and sold to enable landlords to sidestep vigorous competition in the rental market. Competing landlords agree to submit to Realpage on a daily basis their most sensitive, non-public information, including rental rates, lease terms, and projected vacancies. Realpage then combines this data from competing landlords and feeds it into an algorithm that provides real-time pricing recommendations back to the competing landlords.
The lawsuit accuses Realpage of violating antitrust laws through its algorithm. The DOJ says the algorithm allows landlords to align their prices and avoid competition that would keep rents down. The government points to statements by Realpage's executives themselves, arguing those comments show that higher-ups knew they were hindering competition in the rental housing market. In June, Realpage called the claims false and misleading. The company said landlords decide their own rent prices and are free to reject its recommendations. The attorneys general of 8 states have joined the lawsuit. That's as the real estate industry is adapting to new rules. Agents and buyers are still figuring out how to adjust. Here's the story.
Before, buyers' agents were in high demand because the home seller paid the agent. But now, the buyer is supposed to negotiate with and pay their agent themselves. The new rule is creating confusion.
It's best described as you're trying to change the oil of the car while the car is still moving. No one is particularly too clear on what these, quote, rules and regulations are.
Broker Cindy Scholes focuses on New York City and the Hamptons. She says many in the industry aren't sure how to proceed.
It was actually quite odd to work with a client without having an agreement. Someone would just, you're going around with them, you have no idea what your actual structure is.
Scholes says she thinks 30% of buyers will leave the industry.
Buyers reps have to work harder than ever. They have to deliver more value.
Peter Gray is the president of Pyramid Real Estate Group, a group that includes buyers' agents. He says his firm had to do more work consulting lawyers and revising contracts. He says from now on, buyers' agents will have to be very sophisticated to be successful because they'll have to persuade buyers to pay for their service.
They've created larger surveys and they've brought to the table more analytics, and they're demonstrating to the buyer all the different options, the pluses and the minuses, and showing also off-market listings.
Gray believes buyers should still get agents because they do provide real value. But he does see many buyers skipping the agent since the new rule.
It might eliminate buyers agents from the market in a lot of ways, right? If buyers know they have to pay commission to an agent for being a buyer, they might just not be a buyer.
Real estate investor Dutch Mendenhall works with real estate agents every day. He says he's always negotiated with agents directly.
The number of illegal immigrants arriving in Italy by sea has plummeted in 2024. The drop is attributed to offshore asylum agreements between Italy and North African countries. By shifting to a selective immigration system, the Italian government has helped to prevent migrants from dying in the Mediterranean Sea. NTD's international correspondent David Vives has the details.
Illegal immigration to Italy by sea has decreased by 62% in 2024. With 37,000 migrants arriving by August 12, compared to around 98,000 during the same period in 2023. The island of Lampedusa, which saw a massive influx last year, has experienced a significant reduction in landings. Some experts said the success is down to agreements between Italy, the European Union, and North African countries.
The first step was the collaboration between Meloni, Tunisia's government, and the European Union. The agreement has been a great success.
The agreements include the construction of migrant centers outside Italy in Albania, where migrants wishing to come to Italy are assessed. The plan received a mixed reaction, with humanitarian NGOs calling it shameful. However, according to author and policy analyst Alexandre Delval, it has been positive in several ways.
It aims to prevent people from dying at sea thanks to cooperation with the countries where these illegal migrants come. It also targets trafficker mafias.
Since taking office, Meloni has prioritized legal migration, Delval says.
Meloni said the number of illegal migrants should be controlled, and they should not arrive as they did before. They should come legally and be useful for the economy. If migrants are smuggled by traffickers, it's already a bad start. So the goal should be to welcome migrants who are beneficial to the economy.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has called Meloni's offshore asylum plan to tackle illegal immigration out of the box. Other EU countries grappling with rising illegal immigration since 2015 may find this approach inspiring. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Over 500 British academics are urging the UK government to protect free speech in universities. They say people have been cancelled for expressing legal views and that this has serious consequences for everyone. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has this report.
Nearly 600 British academics have signed an open letter urging the Education Secretary to implement free speech protections for universities. The academics warn that if this isn't done, students and staff will continue to be hounded and silenced for the expression of legal opinions. The provisions in Britain's Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act had been due to come into effect at the start of August, but Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson paused the provisions over concerns the Act could expose students to harm and appalling hate speech on campuses. She said she remains committed to free speech and academic freedom. However, Professor David Abulafia from the University of Cambridge says many people are intimidated out of expressing their views.
We've had demonstrations which have indulged in criminal damage. We've had a sense that students feel intimidated over various issues because they can't put alternative views.
The open letter highlighted how hundreds of academics and students have been cancelled and have even lost their jobs for expressing legitimate and legal, if controversial, opinions. It says this has serious consequences for everyone. The academics added that a report published earlier this year by the Academic Freedom Index placed the UK 66th in the Global League table of academic freedom. That's lower than Peru, Burkina Faso, and Georgia. The Department for Education previously raised concerns the Freedom of Speech Act would protect those using hate speech. Abulafia disagrees.
This is complete nonsense. In fact, the Equality Act of 2010 does set out quite clearly where the boundaries lie.
The open letter points out that English law already provides strong protections against harassment and incitement to hatred, which override free speech rights. Abulafia says what the Act aims for is the promotion of civil debate.
Putting contrary views in front of an audience which understands that, of course, they can make objections, but the objections need to be made politely, that raising of voices, shouting and so on, waving of flags, that all of this is inappropriate.
He said cancel culture is harming the ability of people in universities to test ideas. But if civil debate can be restored, then universities can be restored to their original function. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
And joining me now to discuss Kennedy's suspension of his presidential campaign is Gerard Filitti, political strategist and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again just after yesterday with the DNC. To begin, what is your take on the fact that Kennedy is taking his name off the ballot in 10 battleground states, but not in others?
Well, it's not really surprising that he is doing this. He has already declared his intention to support Donald Trump and endorsed him for president. We do expect that he will be that special guest being on stage with Trump at the rally shortly. The issue of his name being on ballots is that it may still create confusion for voters when they go to the ballot box in November. If they see his name, even though he is not still a candidate, and even though he is endorsing and asking people to vote for Trump, they may put down his name and check the box next to his name, and he will get votes that might otherwise go to another candidate. So he is looking to have his name removed from a number of states. Others, where his voters would more likely go towards Kamala Harris, he is less inclined to do so right now.
And Kennedy hasn't always been the biggest supporter of former President Trump. What does it say that he's willing to throw his support behind Trump now?
I think what it says is that he does not like the direction the Democratic Party is going. Remember, this is a Kennedy. This is a scion of the Kennedy family and intrinsically linked to Democratic politics. And I think that his dissatisfaction with the direction that the Democratic Party has gone in recent years, especially during the Biden administration, because remember, Kennedy declared his candidacy when the Democratic nominee was Joe Biden and not Kamala Harris. He was not happy with the direction the party was going. This is why he ran a third-party campaign. And I think that even though he has not always seen eye to eye with Donald Trump, he is more closely aligned with Trump on issues of personal liberty and economics than he is with Kamala Harris.
And with these latest developments, how do you see the presidential election playing out now? Whom will Kennedy's supporters vote for?
Well, it's really hard to tell, and it's a little too early to tell. As we discussed, I think, a few months ago, third-party candidates may poll strongly at the beginning, but by the time you actually get into the ballot box on Election Day, very few people actually end up voting for them. I think that if he hits the campaign trail hard with Donald Trump and for Donald Trump, you will see some tens of thousands of his supporters going to vote for Trump, and that might be all the difference that's needed, especially in battleground states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, to help Trump carry the day. So it's not going to be a big swing, and we may not see the full effect until later in October, but this does ultimately end up helping Donald Trump, maybe enough to carry him over the threshold.
And the Democratic National Convention did just wrap up yesterday. How do you see the Harris-Walz ticket compare now to the Trump-Vance ticket?
Well, the comparisons are the excitement and the dynamism of Harris-Walz and the pugnaciousness of Donald Trump and punching to reclaim his title as the uncontested king of the White House. Essentially, we are the exact same place where we were before the convention. We have a strong showing of Donald Trump and an increase in his support among Republican voters and independents, but now we know more about Kamala Harris, and she has solidified Democratic support behind her. We are seeing a tightening now of the number of voters who are undecided and that can be swung in one direction or another. And as the candidates hit the campaign trail and outline their specific policy agenda, that is when the race will finally turn more concrete in one direction or another.
On that note, candidates tend to try to appeal more to the middle when it comes to the general election. Do you see that happening this time after hearing VP Harris's speech last night?
Well, I think both candidates always appeal to the middle. The real question is, what do they mean by the middle? Kamala Harris last night did a great job in appealing to the middle class, talking about the benefits to the middle class of her tax agenda, of her administration, but she leaves that class undefined. And Democrats have traditionally had a much narrower definition of middle class, such that most Americans who think that they're middle class don't actually qualify as middle class under Democratic administrations. Trump, on the other hand, has seen a wider embrace of the middle class and the benefits of small businesses. So really, while both politicians are speaking the same language, the middle class is a much bigger and broader voter base and community for Donald Trump than for Kamala Harris.
Gerard Filitti, political strategist and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Last night, VP Harris officially accepted the Democratic presidential nomination. In her 40-minute speech, she mentioned China once.
I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership.
Reacting to Harris's speech, former President Trump wrote on Truth Social that, quote, she didn't mention China, she didn't mention fracking, she didn't mention energy, and she didn't mention meaningfully Russia and Ukraine. Biden also only mentioned China once in his Monday speech at the DNC. Harris's speech mainly focused on her upbringing and journey from prosecutor to senator to vice president. She didn't give much detail about her policies, instead choosing to explain them in broad strokes, such as offering tax cuts for the middle-class Americans, ending housing shortages, and securing the border. She talked about foreign policy for about 5 minutes, vowing to stand up for Israel's right to defend itself.
And I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7, including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival.
She also said she and President Biden are working to end the war so the Palestinians can realize their right to security. She added she would stand strong with Ukraine and NATO allies. NATO is the world's most powerful military alliance, which the U.S. is part of. Harris notes she would ensure the U.S. always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. It remains to be seen how her foreign policy would pan out if she's elected. Harris has limited experience in foreign policy and is expected to walk a path similar to Biden's. On China, Biden largely kept Trump's policy positions in place after taking office. Here's a brief overview of Harris's China remarks. Last year, she told CBS that U.S. policy is not about decoupling with China, but de-risking and understanding. When asked if the U.S.-China relations were still tense, Harris said there is tension when you're in a competition of any sort, but added that doesn't mean that the U.S. is seeking conflict. As for China's economy, she said there is increasingly an understanding that China may not be the best bet when investors are looking for stability. And speaking about Taiwan, Harris said the U.S. would continue to support Taiwan's self-defense in 2022. Harris has been a supporter of human rights in China. She joined Senator Marco Rubio to push bills that sanction individuals tied to harming freedom in Hong Kong and human rights in Xinjiang. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A crucial day for two astronauts who have been stranded in space for months. NASA said it would decide tomorrow if the Boeing capsule that took them to the International Space Station is safe enough to fly them back home. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams have been stuck on the ISS since June. Thruster failures and helium leaks delayed Boeing's Starliner from making the journey home. Now NASA has to decide if the Starliner can safely bring them back to Earth or if they need to resort to a backup plan. That would be to bring them back with SpaceX's Crew 9 mission. Boeing said this month tests had shown Starliner could safely return to Earth with the two astronauts on board. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson will meet with other top officials tomorrow to make the final decision. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in sports memorabilia, as a 1932 baseball jersey worn by Babe Ruth is set to shatter the auction record for the most paid for a sports collectible. Where does the bidding stand right now?
Well, it's already at just over $15 million. It's already a sports collectible record. That doesn't even include the 20% buyer's premium, which puts it over $18 million. And it's still got 2 more days to go until it closes, so it could actually go higher. That's well past now the $12.5 million that was paid for the Mickey Mantle rookie just a year ago. More than $10 million paid for Michael Jordan's 1998 finals jersey. You know, even though Babe Ruth played 100 years ago, of course, he's really considered the Michael Jordan of baseball. I mean, he was so far and away the best player of his era. Popularized the home run. I mean, he led the league 12 times in that category. He's still like the top 5 leaders of numerous baseball categories. You know, 80 years after he retired, he really was like the original GOAT.
And looking at this jersey in particular, what makes it so valuable, or do all Babe Ruth jerseys sell for this much?
No, this is from the 1932 World Series Game 3. This is called the called shot game. Now, what happened was when he came to bat in the 5th inning, he pointed to where he was going to hit the ball and then just did that for a home run anyway. Allegedly. Now, some dispute that he was really pointing at the pitcher or the Cubs dugout or the outfield. That's kind of in dispute. But what's not in dispute is how far he hit the ball. It was like a 450-foot home run to center field, a very long home run. In any case, it certainly makes for a better story that he called the shot to center field and hit it there. So I'd like to believe that.
Looking now at NFL news, the Pro Football Hall of Fame trimmed their waiting period for coaches to enter from 5 years after retirement to just 1. Did they state a reason for the change?
No, but it certainly makes sense that coaches retire, since they retired at a much later age than players do, and the players have the same 5-year waiting period. Coaches go into their 70s, players usually retire in their mid-30s. So, I mean, I think they just want coaches to be able to enter the Hall of Fame while they're still at least in semi-good health. Now, one coach this could kind of benefit very soon would be Bill Belichick. You know, he got laid off or fired last year. Though it does sound like they've already started their Hall of Fame selection process for 2025, the next class, and he's not in that, but he would certainly be a shoo-in for 2026. Of course, by that time, he could have another job then. I mean, certainly whoever gets fired first in this NFL season, which there's always coaches that are fired mid-season, he is going to be rumored as a candidate, and he has the best resume out there. So he could be back into coaching actually while he's being selected for the Hall of Fame. We'll have to see.
Shifting gears to college football, the season kicks off tomorrow with a national power Florida State in action. Now, where do they stand in their lawsuit against their own conference, the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost at the same point where they were last December when they brought this lawsuit. The judge in the case ordered mediation between the 2 parties, but it doesn't look like it's actually resolved anything. Now, to review, the Seminoles are suing the conference because of the league's exit fee and the grants of rights agreement, which essentially gives the conference the right to their TV revenue, even if they leave the conference during the duration of their TV deal, which that doesn't expire for another 12 years. This could be a long battle. Now, the grants of rights, it's never been successfully challenged in court. I mean, it's been an ironclad agreement that keeps these conferences together, at least, you know, until their TV rights expire. If teams are going to have to leave, they have to do it after the TV agreement expires. Florida State says they're at a huge disadvantage to Big Ten and SEC schools, which is true because those guys make much more money right now. But I'm curious, though, if they are able to exit, what conference are they going to? I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC just expanded to 16 and 18 teams. The Big 12 could be, even though they expanded now to 16 teams. And also, if the grant of rights is finally breached, you could possibly see a flood of their schools trying to leave their conferences. So it would create quite a scenario in college football if that happened.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.